In Christian theology, hell is the place or state into which by God's definitive judgment unrepentant sinners pass either immediately after death or in the general judgment. Its character is inferred from teaching in the biblical texts, some of which, interpreted literally, have given rise to the popular idea of hell. Theologians today generally see hell as the logical consequence of using free will to reject union with God, and, because God will not force conformity, not incompatible with God's justice and mercy. Calvinists, on the other hand, believe hell is a consequence of God's justice for man's sin, but reject the libertarian notion of free will. Different Hebrew and Greek words are translated as hell in most English language Bibles. They include Sheol in the Hebrew Bible and Hades in the New Testament. Many modern versions, such as the New International Version, translate Sheol as grave and simply transliterate Hades. It is generally agreed that both Sheol and Hades do not typically refer to the place of eternal punishment, but to the grave, the temporary abode of the dead, the underworld. Gehenna in the New Testament, where it is described as a place where both soul and body could be destroyed in unquenchable fire. The word is translated as either hell or hellfire in many English versions. The Greek verb tau alpha rho, which occurs once in the New Testament, is almost always translated by a phrase such as thrown down to hell. A few translations render it as Tartarus. Of this term, the Holman Christian Standard Bible states, Tartarus is a Greek name for a subterranean place of divine punishment lower than Hades. Jewish background. In ancient Jewish belief, the dead were consigned to Sheol, a place to which all were sent indiscriminately. Sheol was thought of as a place situated below the ground, a place of darkness, silence and forgetfulness. By the 3rd to 2nd century BC, the idea had grown to encompass separate divisions in Sheol for the righteous and wicked, and by the time of Jesus, some Jews had come to believe that those in Sheol awaited the resurrection of the dead either in comfort or in torment. By at least the late rabbinical period, Gehenna was viewed as the place of ultimate punishment, exemplified by the rabbinical statement, the best of physicians are destined to Gehenna. Also described in Assumption of Moses and 2 Esdras. The term is derived from Hinnom, a valley near Jerusalem originally used as a location for human sacrifices to the idol Moloch, and he defiled the Tophet, which is in the valley of Ben Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter pass through the fire to Molech. And they built the high places of the Baal, which are in the valley of Ben Hinnom, to cause the sons and the daughters to pass through the fire to Molech, which I did not command them, nor did it come into my mind that they should do this abomination, to cause Judah to sin. In the Greek Septuagint, the Hebrew word Sheol was translated as Hades, the name for the underworld and abode of the dead in Greek mythology. The realm of eternal punishment in Hellenistic mythology was Tartarus. Hades was a form of limbo for the unjudged dead. Hell in the New Testament. 3 different New Testament words appear in most English translations as hell. The most common New Testament term translated as hell is gamma epsilon nu alpha, a direct loan of Hebrew. Apart from one use in James chapter 3 verse 6, this term is found exclusively in the Synoptic Gospels. Gehenna is most frequently described as a place of fiery torment. Other passages mention darkness and weeping and gnashing of teeth. Apart from the use of the term Gehenna, the Johannine writings refer to the destiny of the wicked in terms of perishing, death, and condemnation, or judgment. Paul speaks of wrath and everlasting destruction, while the general epistles use a range of terms and images including raging fire, destruction, eternal fire, and blackest darkness. The Book of Revelation contains the image of a lake of fire and burning sulfur, where the devil, the beast, and false prophet will be tormented day and night forever and ever, along with those who worship the beast to receive its mark. The New Testament also uses the Greek word Hades, usually to refer to the abode of the dead. Only one passage describes Hades as a place of torment, the parable of Lazarus and Dives. Jesus here depicts a wicked man suffering fiery torment in Hades, which is contrasted with the bosom of Abraham, and explains that it is impossible to cross over from one to the other. Some scholars believe that this parable reflects the intertestamental Jewish view of Hades as containing separate divisions for the wicked and righteous. In Revelation chapter 20 verses 13 to 14, Hades is itself thrown into the lake of fire after being emptied of the dead. Parables of Jesus concerning the hereafter. In the eschatological discourse of Matthew chapter 25 verses 31 to 46, Jesus says that, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, he will separate people from one another as a shepherd separates sheep from goats, and will consign to everlasting fire those who fail to aid the least of his brothers. This separation is stark, with no explicit provision made for fine gradations of merit or guilt. Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For one was hungry and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison and you did not look after me. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. In a parable about the rich man and Lazarus, in Luke chapter 16 verses 19 to 31, the poor man Lazarus enjoys a blissful repose in the bosom of Abraham, while the rich man who was happy in life is tormented by fire in Hades, the two realms being separated by a great chasm. Orthodox conceptions of hell. Basic Orthodox teachings on hell. Eastern Orthodox views. The Eastern Orthodox Church teaches that heaven and hell are relations to or experiences of God's just and loving presence. There is no created place of divine absence, nor is hell an ontological separation from God. One expression of the Eastern teaching is that hell and heaven are dimensions of God's intensifying presence, as this presence is experienced either as torment or as paradise depending on the spiritual state of a person dwelling with God. For one who hates God and by extension hates himself as God's image-bearer, to be encompassed by the divine presence could only result in unspeakable anguish. Aristotle, Papa Nicolau and Elizabeth H. Prodromo wrote in the book Thinking Through a Faith, New Perspectives from Orthodox Christian Scholars that for the Orthodox, those theological symbols, heaven and hell, are not crudely understood as spatial destinations but rather refer to the experience of God's presence according to two different modes. Several Orthodox theologians to describe hell as separation from God, in the sense of being out of fellowship or loving communion. Archimandrite Sophrony spoke of the hell of separation from God. Paul Evdokimov stated, hell is nothing else but separation of man from God, his autonomy excluding him from the place where God is present. Quote, according to Theodore Stylianopoulos, hell is a spiritual state of separation from God and inability to experience the love of God, while being conscious of the ultimate deprivation of it as punishment. Michel Cano stated, hell is none other than the state of separation from God, a condition into which humanity was plunged for having preferred the creature to the Creator. It is the human creature, therefore, and not God, who engenders hell. Created free for the sake of love, man possesses the incredible power to reject this love, to say no to God. By refusing communion with God, he becomes a predator, condemning himself to a spiritual death more dreadful than the physical death that derives from it. Another writer declared, "The circumstances that rise before us, the problems we encounter, the relationships we form, the choices we make, all ultimately concern our eternal union with the separation from God." The Eastern Orthodox Church rejects what is presented as the Roman Catholic doctrine of purgatory as a place where believers suffer as their venial sins are purged before gaining admittance to heaven. Contrary to Western Christianity, both Roman and Protestant varieties, the Christians of the East emphasize the mystery of God in his pre-eternal transcendence and maintain a tradition of apophatic theology, while the technical, cataphatic theology of scholasticism tends to be downplayed or viewed as subordinate. Thus, there is no single official teaching of the Church apart from apostolic doctrine received and, when necessary, defined by ecumenical councils. The orthodox positions on hell are derived from the sayings of the saints and the consensus views of the Church Fathers. They are not in agreement on all points, and no council universally recognized by the Eastern Orthodox churches has formulated doctrine on hell. So there is no official doctrine to which all the faithful are bound. Beliefs concerning the nature and duration of hell are considered theologomena, or theological opinions, rather than dogmas of the Church. Images of hell. According to Theodore Stylianopoulos, many Orthodox saints and writers assume the general view of hell as a place of punishment, even by means of material instruments such as fire, whether of the soul after death or both soul and body after the resurrection. St. John Chrysostom pictured hell as associated with unquenchable fire and various kinds of torments and torrents of punishment. Eastern Orthodox icons of the Last Judgment, most notably in the Slavic traditions, often depict tormented, lost sinners in hell. Pages 66 to 69 of John Paul Himke's Last Judgment iconography in the Carpathians provides an illustrated description of some such 15th-century Carpathian icons based on a Northern Rus prototype. The depiction in these particular icons, a depiction that may have developed from 12th-century Greek and South Slavic depictions differentiating sinners and the punishments, is referred to by Himke as the new hell, because various sinners are being punished in a squarish area with torments that did not appear in the standard Byzantine iconography. Icons based on the Ladder of Divine Ascent by St. John Climacus show monks ascending a 30-rung ladder to heaven represented by Christ, or succumbing to the arrows of demons and falling from the ladder into hell, sometimes represented by an open-jawed dragon. Roman Catholicism, Nature of Hell. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, which when published in 1992, Pope John Paul II declared to be a sure norm for teaching the faith, defines hell as eternal fiery punishment for refusing to love God. We cannot be united with God unless we freely choose to love Him, but we cannot love God if we sin gravely against Him, against our neighbor or against ourselves. He who does not love remains in death. Anyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. Our Lord warns us that we shall be separated from Him if we fail to meet the serious needs of the poor and the little ones who are His brethren. To die in mortal sin without repenting and accepting God's merciful love means remaining separated from Him forever by our own free choice. This state of definitive self-exclusion from communion with God and the blessed is called hell. Jesus often speaks of Gehenna, of the unquenchable fire reserved for those who to the end of their lives refuse to believe and be converted, where both soul and body can be lost. Jesus solemnly proclaims that he will send his angels, and they will gather all evildoers, and throw them into the furnace of fire, and that he will pronounce the condemnation, "Depart from me, you cursed," into the eternal fire. The teaching of the Church affirms the existence of hell and its eternity. Immediately after death, the souls of those who die in a state of mortal sin descend into hell, which is described as eternal fire. Hell is a place or a state. Writing in the 1910 Catholic Encyclopedia, Joseph Hontheim said that theologians generally accept the opinion that hell is really within the earth. The Church has decided nothing on this subject, hence we may say hell is a definite place, but where it is, we do not know. Quote, he cited the view of St. Augustine of Hippo that hell is under the earth, and that of St. Gregory the Great that hell is either on the earth or under it. On the other hand, Catholic theologian Hans Urs von Balthasar said that we must see that hell is not an object that is full or empty of human individuals, but a possibility that is not created by God but in any case by the free individuals who choose it. The Catholic Faith Handbook for Youth, with imprimatur of 2007, also says that, more accurately, heaven and hell are not places but states. Capuchin theologian Berard Marthil also says that hell is not a place. Many have in the past considered hell to be a place. Some have rejected metaphorical interpretations of the biblical descriptions of hell, and have attributed to hell a location within the earth, while others who uphold the opinion that hell is a definite place, say instead that its location is unknown. Other Catholics neither affirm nor deny that hell is a place, and speak of it as a place, a state. Ludwig Ott's work, The Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma, said, hell is a place, a state of eternal punishment inhabited by those rejected by God. Robert J. Fox wrote, hell is a place, a state of eternal punishment inhabited by those rejected by God because such souls have rejected God's saving grace. Evangelicals Norman L. Geisler and Ralph E. Mackenzie interpret official Roman Catholic teaching as, hell is a place, a state of eternal punishment inhabited by those rejected by God. The Catechism, published by Pope Pius X in 1908, defined hell by using the word state alone. Hell is a state to which the wicked are condemned, and in which they are deprived of the sight of God for all eternity, and are in dreadful torments. Pope John Paul II stated on the 28th of July 1999, that, in speaking of hell as a place, the Bible uses a symbolic language, which must be correctly interpreted, rather than a place. Hell indicates the state of those who freely and definitively separate themselves from God, the source of all life and joy. Quote, some have interpreted these words as a denial that hell can be considered to be a place, or at least is providing an alternative picture of hell. Others have explicitly disagreed with the interpretation of what the Pope said is an actual denial that hell can be considered a place, and have said that the Pope was only directing attention away from what is secondary to the real essence of hell. In a homily that he gave on the 25th of March 2007, Pope Benedict XVI stated, Jesus came to tell us that he wants us all in heaven, and that hell, of which so little is said in our time, exists and is eternal for those who close their hearts to his love. Journalist Richard Owen's interpretation of this remark as declaring that hell is an actual place was reported in many media, but in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, over whose production Benedict presided when he was prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, we read, the chief punishment of hell is eternal separation from God. Nature of suffering in hell. It is agreed that hell is a place of suffering. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states, Jesus often speaks of Gehenna, of the unquenchable fire, reserved for those who to the end of their lives refuse to believe and be converted, where both soul and body can be lost. Jesus solemnly proclaims that he will send his angels, and they will gather all evildoers and throw them into the furnace of fire, and that he will pronounce the condemnation, "Depart from me, you cursed," into the eternal fire. The teaching of the Church affirms the existence of hell and its eternity. Immediately after death, the souls of those who die in a state of mortal sin descend into hell, where they suffer the punishments of hell, eternal fire. The chief punishment of hell is eternal separation from God, in whom alone man can possess the life and happiness for which he was created and for which he longs. Although the Catechism explicitly speaks of the punishments of hell in the plural, calling them eternal fire, and speaks of eternal separation from God as the chief of those punishments, one commentator claims that it is non-committal on the existence of forms of punishment other than that of separation of God. After all, God, being above all a merciful and loving entity, takes no pleasure in the death of the living, and does not will or predestine anyone to go there. Another interpretation is that the Catechism by no means denies other forms of suffering, but stresses that the pain of loss is central to the Catholic understanding of hell. Saint Augustine of Hippo said that the suffering of hell is compounded because God continues to love the sinner who is not able to return the love. According to the Church, whatever is the nature of the sufferings, they are not imposed by a vindictive judge. Concerning the detailed specific nature of hell, the Catholic Church has defined nothing. It is useless to speculate about its true nature, and more sensible to confess our ignorance in a question that evidently exceeds human understanding. In his book, Inventing Hell, Catholic writer and historian John M. Sweeney is critical of the ways that Christians have appropriated Dante's vision and images of hell. In its review, Publishers Weekly called the book persuasively argued. An article on the same subject by Sweeney that was published on the Huffington Post's religion page was liked by more than 19,000 people, including Anne Rice. Visions concerning hell. A number of Catholic mystics and saints have claimed to have received visions of hell or other revelations concerning hell during various Marian apparitions, such as those at Fatima or at Kiboho. The visionaries claimed that the Virgin Mary during the course of the visions showed them a view of hell where sinners were suffering. In the Bible, John of Patmos in the Book of Revelations writes about seeing a lake of fire where the beast and all those marked with his number were placed. Columba of Iona is alleged to have on several occasions to have even been able to name particular individuals who he said were going to end life in hellfire for the sins, and accurately predicted the way they would die before the event had even happened. A story recorded by Cluniac monks in the Middle Ages claimed that Saint Benedict appeared to a monk on one occasion and told the monk that there had just been a monk who had fled the monastic life to go back into the world, and the ex-monk then died and he went to hell. Protestantism. The varying Protestant views of hell, both in relation to Hades and Gehenna, are largely a function of the varying Protestant views on the intermediate state between death and resurrection, and different views on the immortality of the soul of the alternative, the conditional immortality. For example, John Calvin, who believed in conscious existence after death, had a very different concept of hell to Martin Luther, who held that death was sleep. In most Protestant traditions, hell is the place created by God for the punishment of the devil and fallen angels, and those whose names are not written in the book of life. It is the final destiny of every person who does not receive salvation, where they will be punished for the sins. People will be consigned to hell after the last judgment. Eternal torment view. One historic Protestant view of hell is expressed in the Westminster Confession: "But the wicked, who know not God, and obey not the gospel of Jesus Christ, shall be cast into eternal torments, and punished with everlasting destruction from the presence of the Lord, and from the glory of his power." According to the Alliance Commission on Unity and Truth among evangelicals, the majority of Protestants have held that hell will be a place of unending conscious torment, both physical and spiritual, although some recent writers such as Anglo-Catholic C.S. Lewis and J.P. Moreland have cast hell in terms of eternal separation from God. Certain biblical texts have led some theologians to the conclusion that punishment in hell, though eternal and irrevocable, will be proportional to the deeds of each soul. Another area of debate is the fate of the unevangelized, those who die in infancy, and the mentally disabled. According to Acute, some Protestants agree with Augustine that people in these categories will be damned to hell for original sin, while others believe that God will make an exception in these cases. View of conditional immortality and annihilationism. A minority of Protestants believe in the doctrine of conditional immortality, which teaches that those sent to hell will not experience eternal conscious punishment, but instead will be extinguished or annihilated after a period of limited conscious punishment. Prominent evangelical theologians who have adopted conditionalist beliefs include John Wenham, Edward Fudge, Clark Pinnock and John Stott. Conditionalists typically reject the traditional concept of the immortality of the soul. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, Jehovah's Witnesses and Christadelphians teach the annihilationist viewpoint.